Here's the uncomfortable reality. The final sign is not going to be something so obvious that the whole world agrees on it. It's not going to be a giant trumpet in the sky or a neon arrow pointing to the date on your calendar. The final sign will be moral collapse dressed as progress. It will be when truth becomes so relative that people stop even caring what's true. It will be when society becomes so numb that evil no longer shocks it. When people can watch corruption, violence, and injustice unfold right in front of them and feel nothing but a shrug. You can already see this happening. Look around. How many people today can't explain the most basic truths about life? How many overlook obvious wrongs just because it's easier, more profitable, or helps them avoid trouble? This isn't just a cultural problem, it's a spiritual sickness. When a society forgets what is truly right and wrong, it becomes ready to follow any leader who promises order. And that's when history shows the most dangerous leaders appear, those who speak of peace while secretly planning control. The final sign isn't only out there, in the news it's inside us. The real test is in our hearts. Are we firmly grounded in truth, or just following whatever is popular? Are we willing to stand for what's right, even if it costs us, or do we choose the safety of silence? These questions matter because when the time of testing comes, you won't suddenly become courageous. You'll only have the courage you've already built. When people imagine the final sign that signals we are near the end, they often picture something so dramatic that no one could possibly miss it. A sky split open, a catastrophic war, a global disaster that shakes every soul awake. But history and human nature suggest otherwise. The most decisive signs often arrive quietly, not with the roar of thunder, but with the subtle erosion of foundations. They unfold in ways that are easy to overlook because they blend into the rhythms of everyday life. That is what makes them so dangerous. The final sign may not be a sudden global event at all, but a gradual shift in the collective conscience, a slow fading of moral clarity that goes unnoticed until it's too late. It could be the normalization of lies, the quiet acceptance of injustice, or the casual dismissal of truth as merely someone's opinion. These changes rarely spark headlines, but they rewrite the very framework of society. Over time, they create a culture where wrong feels right and right feels uncomfortable. The most effective forms of deception don't shock you. They seduce you. They tell you that compromise is progress, that abandoning principle is being open-minded, that truth is too rigid for a modern world. And while people are distracted, entertained, and busied with lesser concerns, the real transformation happens beneath the surface. By the time they recognize the danger, the shift has already taken root in law, culture, and even personal values. This is why the final sign is not merely an event to watch for, it is a condition to discern. It will not announce itself with sirens or banners. It will present itself as the next logical step in the evolution of society, cloaked in language that sounds noble, humane, and inclusive. Only those who have trained themselves to measure reality against an unchanging standard will see through the disguise. And that is why preparation is so critical. Not to be caught waiting for a spectacular moment that may never come, but to stay awake to the slow, steady signs that prove the end is closer than most will dare to believe. One of the most overlooked realities about approaching the end is that people are often not caught off guard by a lack of information. They are caught off guard by a lack of attention. The signs are usually there, but they are drowned out by noise, busyness, and distraction. In our modern world, we are flooded with news, updates, and opinions every second, yet most of it keeps us focused on the immediate and trivial rather than the deep and eternal. This is not accidental. It is one of the most effective ways to keep a society from recognizing what truly matters. The human mind is easily lulled into a false sense of security when nothing obviously catastrophic is happening. This is why even in moments of political tension, cultural decay, or moral compromise, people can still convince themselves that life is normal. As long as the routines continue, work, entertainment, social media, there's an illusion of stability, but history teaches that collapse often begins long before it is visible. Empires have fallen not when the final battle started, but when the people had already surrendered their vigilance, their principles, and their courage. The real danger of distraction is that it prevents people from connecting the dots. A small change here, a small compromise there on their own, they seem harmless. But added together over years, they form a pattern that reveals a deeper shift in power, values, and culture. This is exactly how moral erosion becomes normalized, not in a single day, but in 1,000 tiny steps. Each one is justified as just the way things are now, until finally the landscape is unrecognizable. Those who want to see clearly must choose to live differently. That means turning down the volume of constant noise and paying closer attention to what is changing beneath the surface. It means learning from history instead of assuming it could never happen here. It means refusing to outsource moral responsibility to leaders, institutions, or popular opinion. The signs that matter most are rarely broadcast loudly. They are noticed by those who train their eyes to see them. And in a time where attention is the rarest and most valuable resource, those who stay awake will be the ones best prepared when the final sign appears. One of the clearest signs that we are near the end is the open and deliberate rejection of truth, not just by individuals, but by entire cultures. This isn't simply a matter of people making mistakes or having different opinions. It's the active choice to replace what is true with what is convenient, to call darkness light and light darkness. This shift does not happen overnight. It develops over time as a society becomes more comfortable with moral compromise, and eventually, truth itself becomes offensive. We are living in a time where truth is treated as if it's subjective, something that can be altered to fit personal preference. This is dangerous because truth, by its very nature, does not change to suit our feelings. When a society embraces the idea that everyone can have their own truth, it destroys the foundation of accountability. Without a shared understanding of right and wrong, justice becomes selective and morality becomes negotiable. At that point, the strongest voice or the most powerful authority decides what is true for everyone else. This is why deception spreads so easily in an age like ours. When people no longer anchor their lives to a fixed moral standard, they are vulnerable to manipulation. A culture that rejects objective truth is a culture that can be led anywhere, especially by leaders who know how to appeal to fear, pride, or desire. And when the masses have been conditioned to prefer comforting lies over uncomfortable truths, they will often fight to defend their own deception rather than face reality. The rejection of truth is not just a philosophical issue, it has real, devastating consequences. Families fall apart when honesty is abandoned. Nations weaken when corruption is normalized. Communities break down when justice is no longer applied equally. And faith itself becomes hollow when people follow a God of their own imagination rather than the God who actually exists. This is why the rejection of truth is such a dangerous sign of the times. It marks the point where a society becomes incapable of correcting its course. When the compass is broken, it doesn't matter how determined you are to move forward. You're still lost. And unless people are willing to humble themselves, confront reality, and align their lives with what is unchanging, that society is destined to drift further into the shadows until it can no longer find its way back. Another powerful sign that we are nearing the end is the rapid erosion of moral courage among people who should be standing for what is right. Courage is not merely the absence of fear, it is the ability to act rightly despite fear. Throughout history, every great moral collapse was made possible not only by the aggressors who pushed evil forward, but by the silence and passivity of those who knew better and yet chose to do nothing. And today, we are witnessing a generation that has been conditioned to avoid conflict at all costs, even if it means abandoning truth. This erosion of courage is fueled by a culture that prizes comfort over conviction. People have been taught that the highest goal is to feel safe, accepted, and unoffended. As a result, truth becomes negotiable if speaking it risks losing friends, status, or security. This mindset turns even the most devout believers into passive observers, people who agree in private but remain silent in public. It's a dangerous place to be because moral cowardice doesn't stay small. It grows with every compromise until silence becomes the default response to injustice. We can see this in how quickly people retreat from difficult conversations about morality, faith, or responsibility. They avoid speaking out against deception, corruption, and evil because they fear being labeled, ridiculed, or canceled. But the irony is that in their attempt to protect themselves from discomfort, they are paving the way for the very world they fear, one in which truth is suppressed and evil is normalized. History has shown that when good people fail to resist early, they will eventually be forced to live under the full weight of the systems they refuse to confront. The absence of courage is more than a personal weakness, it's a societal vulnerability. When moral courage fades, it creates a vacuum that power-hungry forces are quick to fill. And once that happens, resistance becomes far harder because the cost of speaking up is no longer just social. It becomes physical, economic, and even life-threatening. This is why courage must be cultivated now, before the pressure reaches its peak. If a generation cannot stand for truth when it's unpopular, it will certainly not stand when it's illegal. That is why the erosion of moral courage is such a defining sign of the times. It tells us not only where society is headed, but also how ready, or unready, its people are to face what's coming. The time to be brave is not when the battle is already lost. It's now, while we still have the freedom to choose to stand. The signs around us are not abstract warnings. They are urgent calls to prepare our hearts, sharpen our minds, and strengthen our resolve. Moral decay, spiritual blindness, and the loss of courage are not random events. They are markers of a world drifting toward a point of no return. History has shown that societies do not collapse all at once. They erode from within, often while their people remain distracted or complacent. If we don't act now, the challenges ahead will arrive before we're strong enough to handle them. When the storm hits, we won't magically become strong. We'll only have the strength we've built through today's preparation. That's why the choice is clear. Either we wake up now, take responsibility for the truth we know, and live with courage, or we stay asleep and get carried away. Every day we waste makes the coming struggle harder. But every day we choose to be brave, speak the truth, and stand for what's right, we lay a solid foundation for the final test. The end isn't something to fear if we're ready. It's something we can face with confidence and steady faith. The time to prepare isn't later, it's now.